Hello, you are on the channel The Truths of Life. There is a story in the Bible that is so mysterious, which, to this day, many people cannot fully understand. The story of a man who fought against God and survived. It was not a vision. It was not a dream. It was a hell physical fight for an entire night. But the question is, why would God set foot on earth to fight an ordinary man? And even scarier, why did this man refuse to let go of God, even though he knew he might die? That night, something happened. The name of that man changed. His body changed. And his life was never the same, because in that darkness, Jacob discovered something about God that almost no one had the courage to face. Before we start, leave your like and subscribe to the channel to help us reach the goal of 100 subscribers. This helps the channel a lot to continue bringing deep and mysterious biblical stories like this. Now, imagine spending a whole night fighting someone and discover at dawn that he was fighting against God himself. It seems impossible, but that story is in the Bible. The story of a man who fought against God and survived. It was not a vision. It was not a dream. It was a hell physical fight for an entire night. But the question is, why would God set foot on earth to fight an ordinary man? And even scarier, why did this man refuse to let go of God, even though he knew he might die? That night, something happened. The name of that man changed. His body changed. And his life was never the same, because in that darkness, Jacob discovered something about God that almost no one had the courage to face. Jacob was not known for his strength, not even by courage, nor for being a great warrior. In fact, for much of his life, Jacob was known for something else: deception. From the beginning, his story already seemed marked by conflict. While still in his mother's womb, the Bible says that he fought with his twin brother, Esau, and when he was finally born, Jacob went out holding his brother's heel, as if from that moment on I was trying to take his place. The years passed, but that dispute never disappeared. Esau was strong, impulsive, loved by his father. Jacob was quieter, more calculating, and always watching for the right moment to act. Until one day, he saw the perfect opportunity. Taking advantage of his brother's weakness, Jacob convinced Esau to exchange his inheritance for a plate of food. But that was still not enough. What Jacob really wanted was his father's blessing, the blessing that belonged to the older brother. Then came the lie that would change his life forever. With the help of his mother, Jacob deceived his own father, Isaac, who was already old and almost blind. Wearing Esau's clothes and hiding his identity, he received the blessing that was not his. But stolen blessings always carry consequences. When Esau found out what happened, hatred took hold of him. The Bible says that he decided to kill Jacob, and that same night, Jacob had to flee desperately, leaving behind his home, his family, and everything he knew. From that moment on, his life became a long road of fear, guilt, and flight. For years, Jacob tried to build a new life. He worked, got rich, formed a family. On the outside, he looked blessed, but inside him there was still something broken, because no matter how much time passes, some wounds are still alive. And now, after so many years on the run, Jacob was about to meet again the man who had sworn to kill him. After years on the run, Jacob finally received an order that changed everything. God wanted him to return home, but there was a problem. The way back was also the direct way to Esau, the brother he betrayed, deceived, and abandoned years before. The same man who had sworn to kill him. Even after such a long time, Jacob knew that some wounds do not go away easily. And now, every step toward his land seemed to bring him closer to death itself. Then, as he was crossing the desert with his family, servants, and animals, a piece of news made his heart freeze. Esau was coming to meet him, and he was not alone. 400 men accompanied him. At that moment, Jacob understood what that meant. It didn't feel like a reception. It looked like an army. Fear took over him immediately. For the first time in many years, all the choices of the past have returned like an impossible storm to avoid. The Bible says that Jacob was deeply distressed. So he began to divide everything he owned into separate groups. trying to lessen the losses in case Esau attacked. It was as if, deep down, he was already preparing to watch his own life fall apart. But that night, something inside Jacob looked different. For the first time, he couldn't run away. There was nowhere else to run. There were no more lies to hide the truth. So Jacob did something he might not have done in a long time. He prayed. In the midst of fear, he cried out to God for deliverance. Not like the deceitful man of before, but as someone finally broken by the weight of his own history. Even so, the fear was still there, because when night fell, Jacob still believed that the dawn could be the last of his life, and he had no idea that before he faced Esau, would have to face something much more frightening. That night, Jacob made a strange decision. He took his family, his servants, everything he owned, and he made them cross the river in front of him. But he stayed alone. No protection, with no one by his side. Darkness covered the desert, and the silence of dawn seemed too heavy. Jacob knew that when the sun rose, he might meet Esau for the last time. Maybe that was his last night alive. But something much stranger was about to happen. The Bible says that suddenly a man appeared and began to wrestle with Jacob without warning, no explanation. In the midst of the darkness, the two began a violent fight that lasted all night. Imagine that scene, the sound of sand being dragged, heavy breathing, scams, silence all around, and Jacob desperately trying to resist that mysterious man. But who was he? An angel, an enemy, a spirit, or something much scarier? The longer the fight continued, the stranger everything became, because that man seemed to possess an impossible strength. Even so, he allowed Jacob to continue fighting. The hours passed, and neither of them stopped, until Jacob began to notice something disturbing. The presence of that man was not normal. There was something divine in that darkness, something that made the fear grow by the second. And at that moment, perhaps for the first time in his life, Jacob understood that he was not fighting an ordinary human being. He was facing something supernatural, something too powerful to explain. And yet, he kept fighting. The fighting continued until almost dawn. Jacob was already exhausted. His body burned with pain. His strength faded little by little, but he still refused to stop. And then something impossible happened. That mysterious man simply touched Jacob's thigh. It was no ordinary scam. It was not a movement of struggle. It was just a touch. And immediately Jacob's leg moved out of place. At that moment, everything changed. Because no ordinary man could do that. No human being would have the power to destroy someone's body with a simple touch. It was at that moment that Jacob realized the terrifying truth. He wasn't fighting just any man. I was fighting against God. Fear took over him. But, strangely, Jacob did not let go. Even injured, even without strength, even feeling pain, he continued to cling to that divine presence. It was as if, for the first time in his entire life, Jacob understood that this struggle was greater than fear or survival. Then came one of the most powerful phrases in the Bible. I will not let thee go, except thou bless me. That man who spent his whole life trying to conquer everything through lying, manipulation, and escape. Now it was broken. No strength, no masks, no pride. And for the first time, he didn't want to steal a blessing. He wanted to receive it directly from God. That morning, while limping and wounded, Jacob finally realized that God wasn't just fighting his body. He was fighting against who he had been all his life. Dawn was beginning to appear on the horizon. After hours of fighting, wounded and without strength, Jacob still remained clinging to that mysterious presence. Then, in the middle of that silent dawn, the man asked, "What's your name?" But that question seemed to go far, beyond a simple presentation. Because, at that time, names carried meaning, and the name Jacob meant someone deceitful, someone who takes the place of others. Throughout his life, that name defined who he was. The man who deceived his brother, the man who lied to his father, the man who lived fleeing the consequences of his own past. And perhaps for the first time, Jacob answered without hiding who he really was. Then came something that would change his life forever. That Messiah, his name will no longer Jacob. Israel. Because you have fought with God and with men, and you have won. In that instant, God wasn't just changing a name, he was changing an identity. Jacob entered that night as a man marked by guilt, lies, and fear. But he came out of it as someone transformed, injured, but transformed, limping, but different. The mark on his leg would remain forever as a reminder of that impossible night, the night a man fought against God. Onsvide, and when the sun finally rose, Jacob limped through that place slowly, but for the first time in many years. He was no longer running away. Many people believe that this story is just about a physical fight, but that night, Jacob was not just fighting against God, he was fighting himself, against the man he had been all his life. For years, Jacob tried to control everything around him. He lied to get blessings. He fled to escape the consequences. He lived carrying fear, guilt, and insecurity hidden inside him. But that morning, God finally brought him face to face with what he avoided most, the truth about who he was. And perhaps that is exactly why God allowed that fight. Not to destroy Jacob, but to break it, transform it, change your identity forever. Because some changes only happen when we stop running away. The mark on Jacob's leg never disappeared. He carried that wound for the rest of his life. But, ironically, it was precisely in that weakness that he became spiritually stronger. And there is something scary about this story, because many times we also do the same as Jacob. We try to hide mistakes, run away from the past, control everything with our own hands, until there comes a time when God forces us to face what we have avoided for years. That night, Jacob entered alone, afraid and broken inside, but it came out different, not because God overcame by force, but because he finally stopped fighting against the transformation that God wanted to make in him. And perhaps this is the most powerful part of this story. Sometimes, the biggest battles of our lives don't happen against other people, but against whom we ourselves have become. If you've made it this far, leave your like, subscribe to the channel The Truth of Life, and comment below. What do you think God wanted to teach Jacob that night? Thanks for watching.